Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the live stream, wherever you are in the world. And I've got to say from the get-go, a big apologies for having to postpone yesterday. Thank you very much for your understanding. It's very annoying when things like, well, not annoying, I mean, it's part of life, isn't it? But the last minute I had to get on this conference call, and there was no way around it really. There were a lot of people on it, so I couldn't mess people around, and that was it. So here we are anyway today. As a matter of fact, the same subject, F1 exhibition, on another call immediately after this live stream as well. So it's all happening there. Can't reveal any plans at the moment. All brilliant, and looking forward to it very much, the development of the show. And all the plans for where it's going to go and when it's going to go, etc., will be announced very shortly, I'm sure. But we can say that the current show going really well in Madrid. It's been extended now through to back end of August, so that's good news as well. I was there just quite recently, actually. I was surprised. I was there on a Tuesday morning, and it's now actually not open Monday or Tuesday because it's the holidays, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the weekends. But I was there on a Tuesday morning, it having been closed on the Monday. And I was staggered at how many people were there, queuing up, going in, looking around on Tuesday. Lots of girls and guys, actually, which is very interesting to see. I'm always intrigued by what people think of the film we made with Carl Kempf, one of my good friends, and the inventor, if you like, of telemetry in Formula One, going way back now to 1976. And, before that, really, 75 probably, I think he was seconded to Goodyear. And he's a great guy. He's a fellow at Intel, senior player at Intel these days, lives in Scottsdale. And it's obviously quite it's not cerebral, it's quite technical, isn't it, the whole thing, but he explains it really well and talks about the early days of telemetry. And I always think that's a good litmus test to see how many people are watching that film at any given moment. And there were lots there, lots of young people. So that was great. Studenty looking people as well, which is what it's all about. So that was really good. So yeah, lots going on with the show, which is why I'm really flat out at the moment. Plus, obviously, ongoing Formula One stuff. You got a double header. I mean, even the Formula One teams are saying, I can't believe it's a double header. I thought it all ended in Hungary. Got to go to Spa after Hungary. Talk about I was going to say the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, Spa is it's absolutely not the case. Not ridiculous at all. One extreme to the other, I think, is all you can say in terms of what the circuits demand and what they're all about. I mean, Hungary is all about high downforce, very high downforce, lots of slow corners, lots of traction episodes, as they like to talk about, which means that someone like Perez is going to be in good shape around Hungary. I think there'll be a lot of places where he'll do very well with his ability to look after the rear tyres in traction. And I've got to say here, big news from Pirelli. They're running much softer compounds this year than last year. Why would they be doing that, actually? I suppose just to make it more interesting, maybe. But they have that softer range of compounds, medium, soft, and hard, much softer than last year. And given how hot it can be in Hungary, that's quite a big deal. And secondly, at Imola, they tried this new system of limiting and controlling the tyres that you could use in qualifying. And so that's what's going to be tried again in Hungary, although the forecast at the moment is sort of 70% chance of rain on Friday, 70 or 65% chance on Saturday. So whether they actually get there this time around remains to be seen. Probably not. But assuming it's dry, there will be more. The big thing is that you've got to use the hard tyre for Q1, the medium tyre for Q2, and the soft tyre for Q3. And each team has two sets, basically, assuming they don't waste them, for each of those sessions. And so therefore a lot of the teams are going to be thinking that a lot of the teams that might be sort of on the bubble or not so confident getting through to Q2 or even Q2 to Q3, let's talk about Q1 to Q2, are going to be thinking, right, we need to put a quick lap together on the hard tyre. So there's going to be quite a lot of that going on in FPs 1 to 3, which is good. There'll be a lot of action out there. There'll probably be a lot of traffic dramas as well, knowing Hungary, I think, with all the bottleneck type corners you've got there. And so that's something to watch out for. Some of the teams in their pre-race spiels are saying wow, this is a big thing, and it's a whole new strategy, a whole new software that we need for our strategy. And others are sort of shrugging it off and saying, well, it's just going to mean a lot more traffic out there, and we just got to make the car work on hard tires in Q1. I think the interesting thing, actually, if you look at it, I mean, there's a lot of talk about that, but I think I like to look at it from the other perspective, which is, say, Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and how they will be looking at this. And I think they'll be thinking, well, we're going to get through to Q2, all being well. I mean, assuming we do our job correctly, the car will be okay on the hard tire. We'll get into Q2, and it'll be okay on the medium. And if we do our job and we don't get held up or whatever, we'll get into Q3. And they will therefore focus, I suspect, even more on a quick tire out of the soft, because having the pole in Hungary is worth a lot, much more than a lot of circuits. And that, I suspect, whereas everybody else, a lot of the other teams will be thinking, wow, we've got to make the car work on a hard tire for one quick lap. Red Bull might be thinking, we've really got to get the pole here, and this is an opportunity. Everyone's sort of, looking at how they're going to run the hard or the medium. We'll focus on the soft, thank you very much. So more than normal, you might see Max out there really focusing on that. That's I think, a possible twist to what might be going on. I was interested to see Pierre Gasly describe, they all said they love Hungary, they love Budapest, the people, the fans, the track. And Pierre Gasly said, I love the track, it's a really fast track. It's one of the slowest on the calendars, actually, with very small amount of, relatively small amount of throttle, full throttle as well. But that's Pierre's just general enthusiasm. I was chatting to him not so long ago about about his driving and how he loves Formula One and loves driving Formula One cars. And I said, what is it though? And he said, it's just an adrenaline rush every time I get in the car. Even though I'm accelerating out of the pits, first through to fourth gear, it's just like, wow, this is where I want to be, mega. And I just say, you can't knock that, can you? He's just a kid. And shame he had that shunt with, rephrase that, please, Mr. Windsor. Shame he was taken out by Lance Stroll in the British Grand Prix, because he drove very well, I thought, in the race at Silverstone. Anyway, you'll see I'm sitting slightly off centre. That's because I've got an unbelievably complicated new technique, that I'm going to try and put up the question to which I'm referring on the other half of the screen. And it's going to take a little bit. Bear in mind I'm doing this single-handedly right now. So here goes. I'm going to go to the first question. So I'm copying it. Then I'm going to go to the other page, which is here. I think we'll find. Where is it? Here you go. You see, it's taken quite a long time already, isn't it? Well, good job, Windsor. So not there yet. The one drama with this is that it loves 1 or 2 word questions. It's not so good when it comes to 4-line questions, because I have to shorten them all to make them all fit. And believe me, there is nothing. How about that? Look at that. This is from Kurt Bullman. I wonder if this is, I should be able to tell, but I wonder if this is the Kurt Bullman I used to know and love when I was at Williams. Well, indeed, we all knew and loved throughout the 70s. Unbelievably good suspension chassis guy. Consultant, really good, very good friend of Patrick Head's as well, on the basis that it is. Hi Kurt. Hi Peter. Charles is one of the best drivers on the grid, so how does Carlos sometimes get more out of the car? Also, I'd love to see you, Joe Saywood, on one of your shows. You guys are both legends. Oh, thank you very much, Kurt. So in answer to the first question, as I've been saying for quite a lot of time now, and it's really been since Melbourne, and I think he was very unjustly treated at the restart there. Was it Melbourne? I think it was. Anyway, Carlos Sainz, I think, has been driving very well this year within the realms of what Carlos Sainz does. And bear in mind, when I talk about the different ways that these drivers perform, I'm not saying this is correct, this is incorrect. I'm just saying this is what he does. And this, to me, is what, in the case of the way Max and Lewis and Charles drive, this is also how Sterling Moss and Fangio and Jim Clark drove. I mean, draw from that what you will. And to me, that is the purest way of driving. I'm not saying it's the only way, because Ayrton Senna didn't drive like that, for example. Nelson Piquet didn't. So Carlos Sainz is not a short corner driver, but what he does, it's as if he said, right, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, and I'm going to do it as well as I can. And I think he's taken quite a strong positive step in that direction this year. He's got more consistency. He kind of knows where his limit is, bearing in mind he has a pretty small sweet spot within which to play. And we occasionally see him going off as a result, but he's more consistent, and he's, I think, more able to be a little bit more versatile in different situations. It's a bit of a thing to say, but I get the feeling that he's kind of expanding his repertoire a little bit. So that's on the one side. On the other side of the coin, I don't think Charles Leclerc has been getting the best from his own style of driving this year, for whatever reason. And we've talked a lot about all the various things that are going on at Ferrari, the politics and everything else. In theory, with Fred Vasseur there, it should be a clean sheet of paper, and we should be seeing nothing but the very best Charles Leclerc at every race. That isn't happening, and I don't know enough about the management behind Charles to be able to explain that in a very detailed way. All I can say is he doesn't seem to be able to relax into his own way of driving in the way that he could 2 or 3 years ago. Everything's a bit of an effort with Charles, and he's always been very self-critical, and I get the feeling that his self-criticism sometimes gets the better of him to the point where he's constantly down on himself. That seems to be a trait that's coming through a little bit as well with Charles. So I think what you're seeing there, not so much Carlos, Carlos has got the better of him, but I think it's also Carlos is doing a better job than we've seen at any point of his career, point one. And point two, I don't think Charles Leclerc is doing a particularly good job. We've seen flashes of it, and it's starting to get together. But when Charles Leclerc doesn't go well in the semi-wet, you know there's some issue going on there somewhere in his head or wherever. And I hate to say that, because it's not nice to have an intangible thing that we just write off as, well, he's not on form. But at the moment, well, let's wait and see. Charles was, he's by his own admission, he's not very good in the semi-wet. And, to hear a driver say that is quite shocking, really. Joe Sayward, yeah, great guy. The trouble is, it would just be, we'll answer one question and then 4.5 hours later we get on to question 2, wouldn't we? He's just brilliant, Joe. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. I mean, but don't push me too hard. Here I am. I've got a question up there on the screen, and now you're asking me to have a live guest as well simultaneously. Yeah, well, I'm not that clever, I'm afraid. I'm a bit of a dunce when it comes to all this, as you can tell. So, getting on to the next one now. Let's see if I got this, getting this to work in the way I want to, because the next thing is to replace it, of course, and get the next one looking good. So that's not bad. Let me just have a look. So this is where you're bearing with me, because I'm just trimming everything to fit, which I have to do to get into that space, because it doesn't do it itself. It just, when I cut and paste into this thing, this box, everything is just one long line, which looks ridiculous, as you know. So here we go. Sorry about that box. That is the script in your native language of your name, I think. So sorry about that. But that's just the way it is. There you go. Not bad. Can you guys live with that? I think it's quite good to have it up on screen, isn't it? Hey, Peter, now that Ricciardo is at Alpha Tauri, do you think he's a benchmark for Red Bull to see if Yuki deserves a better Red Bull seat? Do you think Checo will lose his seat to either Yuki or Ricciardo in the near future? No, I don't think it's as well thought through as that. And anyway, what is the benchmark of Daniel Ricciardo? Somebody who's slower than Lando Norris and about the same as Carlos Sainz. Oops. And got blown away by Max anyway. So I don't think you can really say Daniel's a benchmark. What he is a good guy with lots of experience who can drive a race car on a Sunday afternoon in a sort of Fernando Alonso fashion and do some good stuff with it. And it's great to have him back and great to have him around, and he should never have left Red Bull in the first place and we wouldn't be having this discussion. So I think it's as simple as that. I just think they got, disillusioned with Nyck de Vries. As I say, for that, you've got to look back at the reasons why they hired him in the first place. I still don't really understand why they hired him, because it's supposed to be sort of a young driver academy Red Bull thing, and he was never any of that. Then he had that sort of great Italian Grand Prix, and next thing you know, he's driving for Alpha Tauri. It just seemed a very out of character thing for Red Bull these days to do. And what did they expect from him? Did they expect him to blow Yuki away or what? I don't know. I mean, it's just, and then he made a couple of mistakes in traffic, which didn't help. So that, to me, he was cast the wrong way at the wrong time into the wrong team. And there was a lot of song and dance at the time, wasn't there, about the amazing thing of I've just got to check, see what's happened to the logo here before I go any further. There it is, it's back. What's the problem there? Let me just check. So I'm getting very proficient now. I just want to make sure that I've got this the banner. Yeah, it's on loop. Okay. No, what's happened? The banner's going in and out. Nothing's ever easy, is it? So anyway, why is the banner not working? It's so annoying. Sorry, I'm just looking at that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And you know what? I was looking through a book. Now, settling down in Spain, got a little bit more room. Now the banner's back. What is going on? I won't touch anything. I've got a coffee table now, and I've got a coffee table book. I think I mentioned this last time, didn't I? And anyway, another book I've been looking at, which I hadn't seen for a long time, read through, is Pete Coltrane's book of wonderful photographs from the 50s in Formula One. A lot of them in colour. Great photographer, American photographer, came over. Lots of pictures of Dan and Phil and Richie, early Richie, and just good stuff. And all things Ferrari and Maserati and Alpha, not Alpha so much, but just really good period. Anyway, great photographs. And the point I'm making is, there's a picture there of Von Trips's Ferrari, 3.4 litre beautiful Ferrari at the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers. And the caption is, unfortunately, he crashed heavily shortly after this picture was taken, because unlike the Formula One car, the sports car Ferrari had its accelerator on the right-hand side, on the right of the brake, whereas in the Formula One car, the accelerator was in the middle, between the clutch and the brake. So you're telling me that Nyck de Vries did an unbelievable job jumping from two cars in one weekend. Imagine if they'd had the accelerator in a different position on both cars. Yeah, you see my point. It wasn't that big a deal. And they had to do a lot more than that in the old days. So, yeah, there we are. And the second part of the question, do you think Checo will lose his seat to either Yuki or Ricciardo in the near future? Yeah, Red Bull are quite capable of doing things like that, aren't they? They presume they have got some sort of contract with him, obviously. So if they got rid of Checo, they'd be paying him off, and it would be quite a lot of money that they wouldn't be paying, that he wouldn't be providing services for. And yeah, but it's all very well now, the smile, everybody's happy, but is he just going to do the same thing that he did before when he got beaten by Max? And is he going to be the right guy for us? As I keep saying, I wouldn't be surprised to see Alex Albon on the list of drivers they might be looking at as a guy to have in the other car next year alongside Max. So watch this space on that one, I think, is the saying, isn't it? So thank you very much for that question. This is from IP. You've asked two questions in a row, so I'm going to try and be very clever and copy them both and put them both into this space. So let's see how that works. Just going to modify it a little bit. Here we go. And then I'm going to take this one up. Here we go. 1 second. And there we go. You can bear with me on this, can't you? It's worth it in the end, I think. There we go. IP. Thank you for taking the time to photo and draw the way the drivers approach corners. That's very insightful. Well, thank you very much. I think you're referring to the last video I did about, which I've been promising for a long time and not delivering, about all the other drivers that I photographed at La Rascasse at Monaco, just comparing how they are within the team. And just going back to Nyck de Vries, I thought, he actually looked really good through there. He's not a mega long corner driver. He's not a short corner driver either, but he's definitely heading in the right direction. Quite neat and tidy, I thought. He says, sounding a little bit condescending, but you know where I'm coming from. And yeah, but thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, there's a lot more. I'm going to learn as time goes on, I think, about this. But I don't know how many other people out there are talking about the way the drivers are using the cars and the throttle and the steering and the brakes. But to me, that's as fascinating as everything else in Formula One, and there's not enough of it out there. And I love, whenever I go out to dinner and chat or meet for a coffee, anybody who kind of is on my wavelength, we always talk for a long time about things like that and comparing all the different drivers and stuff. So it's always fun doing that, and good to know that you guys like it as well. So I've got to say also, so far so good. Crossing my fingers big time, because there's been a lot of issues in the last couple of days with the internet here and everything else. I hope I'm not playing with fire, tempting fate by saying that it's kind of under control, but there have been a few issues, and the issues are based around something to do with the fiber optic in the evenings here in Spain. And I said, well, what's the evening? When does the evening start? And they said, 9 to 10. And I said, well, be accurate, please. Anyway, they're not being accurate. And so I'm just hoping it's all okay. PJOE Spiker F8. Brilliant. Great name. Hi, Peter from the Netherlands. Oh, well, I think that's very insightful from the last one, which I didn't copy out very well. But thank you very much, PJOE Spiker F8. 7. From the Netherlands. Very good. So let me make sure I get rid of all that very well. Here we go. And 1 second. This isn't too much of a drama, is it? Oh, what's going on here? Since my computer's just nearly out of battery, but that was just a flick of a switch to solve that one, so there's no problem there. I can't seem to get rid of. There we go. That bit's gone. Right, back to the page where the chat. Where are we? Here. This is from iRacing Aussie. I know a couple of iRacing Aussies. I wonder if it's any of the ones I know. It's always here I am copying and pasting. I have no idea what the question's going to say until I actually get it printed out and you see it on the screen at the same time as I do. Could be, Peter, you're a complete idiot. And there I've got it in big, bold, red writing. But that serves me right, doesn't it? Here we go. Nearly there. Sorry about this. It's a bit laborious, isn't it? But I think it's worth it, as I keep saying. I hope it is. Another one. I'm going to move this one a little bit so it looks nice. There you go. iRacing Aussie. Peter, if I may ask about the Alonso humouring Stroll, is the boot on the other foot? Will this weekend be decisive in answering whether Aston have started setting up their car to suit Stroll more? And so it starts. The minute Stroll actually goes a little bit quicker than Fernando, or maybe beats him in a race, it's because the car's set up to favour Stroll. Nah. Fernando can drive anything, remember? Knock the front wing off, rear wing, punctured tyre, radiator hanging off the car. That's when Fernando's at his best, brings the car home in 100 in one piece, and then it falls into 100 pieces as it crosses the line. That's what Fernando's all about. So no, all I've said from day one is not day one, about day 5, was that the way Fernando drives a car, which is he needs a front end, and he can always handle whatever the back end's going to do. He just needs his front end plugged, was never going to work for Lance Stroll. They were always going to need to build in a little bit of understeer for him to be able to get the feel of the car and do what he does. That was my feeling about the way the two of them drive. And as I predicted, they have started to put a bit more understeer into the car for Stroll. That doesn't mean to say that they've also put understeer into the car for Alonso. Why would they? I mean, if Fernando likes the front end plug, why are they going to start giving him understeer? They wouldn't. So I don't think they will have changed Fernando's car at all. And I think all you're seeing is Fernando's perhaps had the odd glitch, and Stroll is starting to be the Lance Stroll that he was when he was, getting front row qualifying positions periodically and looking pretty good alongside Sebastian Vettel. He's not bad, Stroll. He's not some slow guy that's easy to beat. And that's, I guess Fernando has kind of realised this in the last 4 weeks, I would guess. And that's where we're at. But there's no way Fernando hasn't got a setup that he wants. Of course they're going to give him, he's going to have the setup that he wants. It's just that Stroll finally has got a setup that he can drive with and feel a little bit more confident with, I guess is the right way of putting it. So that's what's going on, I think. But I think what will happen now is, I think, whereas before you'd hear Fernando on the radio when he was running P3 and Lance was P8, you'd hear him saying, "Oh, tell Lance he just looked great into the corner," or make sure he knows what brake balance I've got, and being Mr. Helpful. I don't think you'll see too much more of that going on. I think it'll be sort of, let's keep it for myself. Which reminds me, actually, and I hope I haven't done this, but I for the aborted, postponed live stream yesterday, there were a lot of questions, and I was just reading through some of them while I was actually trying to think of. I'll tell you something weird, actually. Yesterday, I wrote a reply in the MySpace for the chat, but it wouldn't send. So I couldn't say to everybody, to all of you people out there, I'm going to have to postpone this. And the only way I could think of, actually, to get the message across was to record a video, which in itself had a glitch in it, and I had to redo the whole thing. So what a nightmare it was. But there was one question which I saw, which was to do with the 86 Hungarian Grand Prix, when famously Piquet and Ayrton Senna had that big battle. And it was a good race, very good race. And because Nelson passed Ayrton quite convincingly. What is going on with this banner? It's so annoying, isn't it, why it does that? I've asked my friend who does this about 8 times for a new banner. It hasn't happened. Anyway, we'll live with it. He passed in quite easily, and then came in for tyres, and at which point Ayrton, who had been sort of not pushing the car very hard, the Lotus Renault at the time, went absolutely flat out for about 8 laps, much quicker than we at Williams thought he was capable of going. And so by the time he had stopped as well, he was something like 8 seconds in front of Nelson again. So but Nelson then had to drive really well, and did drive well to pass him. And there's a big disparity then, not big, but a significant disparity between the power of the Renault engine in the Lotus Renault of Ayrton and the Williams Honda, and it was much quicker on the straight. So, and Nelson got alongside him and inside him and then outside him, and eventually got past, and it was and he won the race. But what the really significant thing about that race was that Nelson had tried he always had use of the spare car. And and race morning, he was in the spare car and the race car trying 2 different diff settings. And he was not quick in the spare car with its diff setting. And all this was to try to lure Nigel into running the diff setting that Nelson had on his race car. So Nelson then raced the spare car with a completely different diff, and it was a much better car. Nigel's setup destroyed the rear tyres after about 10 laps. And that was as a result of Nigel beating him at Brands Hatch in Nelson's spare car, because you remember at Brands was that big shunt, and in the old days the race was stopped if there was a start line shunt and you could get into a spare car. And Nigel won that race in Nelson's spare car with no drink bottle, rubbing it in. And I think Nelson got a lot of flack from the Brazilian press after that and what's going on. And so this was his payback, really. So I only mention all that because of the Stroll Alonso thing that you're mentioning, and there is quite a lot of that, is it sandbagging? I don't know. But if you'll see now, I predict Fernando, you won't see it, but you'll feel the effect of Fernando not wanting to give any more information away to Lance Stroll, I will predict. Only because it's pretty clear that Stroll isn't as far away from Fernando as he was at the start of the year. I'm not saying he's ahead of him, really. I mean, it's much too early to say that, and I don't think he ever will be. But he's a bit nearer, and that will not be fun for Fernando. He won't enjoy that. iRacing Aussie has another question. It says the gap has been closing, and Alonso's reservation on the podium seems not being held for him of late. Yeah, so yeah, it's exactly echoing what I'm saying. This is coming back to Joe Spiker again. Looks like quite an interesting question. I love these questions where they say, if you were this, what would you do? It's very self-indulgent, I know. But we all love those questions, don't we? So let me have a look and see what I can do with this question now. So again, it's quite a long line, so I'm just going to shorten them all. So I think that makes it work. Yeah. Joe Spiker, if you were team principal from one of the teams right now, how would you manage the different driver pairings? And if you're allowed to mix them all, which driver pairings would you want at which team? Well, you say if I was team principal of from one of the teams right now, well, if I was Christian Horner, I'd be doing what Christian Horner does. I'd be letting Max get on and do what he does, and trying to. I don't know what I'd be saying to Checo. I think I'd be saying to Checo, maybe they are anyway. I'd be saying to him, just focus on what you do well, which is what I'm sure they said to Daniel Ricciardo when he was getting antsy at Red Bull, and just focus on what you do well. You're very, very good on traction. You're very good at looking after the rear tyres as a result. This is a race where you can come into your own. We have confidence in you, and just try to give him confidence. And I would send him to Rob Wilson, I guess, for the August break. Do every day. Because I think Checo has the latent talent to be able to shorten these corners a bit and to be able to, manipulate the front a bit more than he does going into a corner. So that's what I would do if I was, say, Christian Horner. If you're allowed to mix them, or which driver pairings would you want at which team? I think I've been asked this question before. It's a really good one, but I think my sort of choice pairing is Leclerc, Norris, because they're both cool guys and they both play good golf. Mind you, if you want to play a bit of cricket, Oscar Piastri's out there as well. He won't be too happy today. Australia didn't seem to have a great day in the fourth test, did they? But Piastri's a serious cricketer, I think, or batsman anyway. But no, I'd go with Lando and Charles. And I do a lot of golf with them. In fact, what I'd do with Lando and Charles, I would actually then incorporate one of the top pro golfers into the team as a sort of representative of the team when he's out there playing on the PGA Tour, doing his pro-ams on a Wednesday or Thursday, talking to all these Fortune 500 CEOs, and I'd be developing my whole sponsorship down that strategy as well. And I'd have my man at the races as well, and we'd all have a good time, and we'd play Augusta and Pebble Beach and have a general laugh, wouldn't we? And I think along the way, Lando and Charles do a pretty good job in the race cars as well. But I think I like the idea of having a very, very good short corner driver and a bit more of a classicist, if you like Lando, and I think they would dovetail really well. I think the engineers would get more information because you've got two styles. They've got that already with Charles and Carlos, I guess. But I don't know. I just think Lando, Charles would be a good team. I think they'd probably get on pretty well together too. So that's what I would do. Another question from you, Joe. He's suggesting some combos. Let's see what you're suggesting then. Yeah, you're allowed to do that. That's good. Let's have a look. You are suggesting. I'm going to delete this and replace it with that. Here we go. So would you have Hamilton and Leclerc at Merck and Max and Lando at Red Bull? Well, you've got the right names in there, kind of. Max and Lando at Red Bull would be good, yeah, very good team. Hamilton and Leclerc at Mercedes. Yep, I'd go for those. They'd be both excellent teams, and it'd be good fun to be team principal of both of those teams. That's definitely the case. Yeah, not sure what, not sure what Max would think of having Lando. I'm probably not that comfortable. I wouldn't have thought. I think he'd rather have Daniel back, I suspect, or maybe Albon. Probably not Albon either. He's quite quick, isn't he? So M.A. Khan, always good for a contentious question. No disrespect meant at all. Always up there on the ball and ready to go. How do I do this? I've forgotten what I'm doing now. Let me have a look. You'd think Windsor would be getting quicker with this, but there is no way around it. You've got to cut these lines. You've got to trim them before they go up. It looks like a short corner question. Wow, that's cool. So let's have a look. M.A. Khan, hi, great pics from Monaco. Thank you very much. Well, they weren't great pics. I mean, hopefully they were indicatively illustrative, but they weren't great photographs. I mean, if Darren Heath saw those photographs, I don't know what he'd do. He'd throw up, I think. Surprised with Lewis. Is his style closer to Ocon Gasly but more refined? They have shortish corners rather than very short corners seen from Max, Mansell or Schumacher. Yeah, I mean, I said that to me, what Lewis was doing at Monaco was a real surprise. And, you know, lo and behold, there he is getting more out of the tyres in Barcelona when the temperatures are down. And in general, getting more out of the 14B than George. And I think, to my eye, Lewis is definitely taking longer corners, leaning on the front more, making the front tyres work more, making the first part of the corner longer, maybe braking later as well than he has at any stage of his Formula One career. And I think it's Lewis thinking this is the only way to drive this car, is just to make sure that I've got the fronts working and I'm up to temperature with the fronts, and I can then do what I need to do. And it's, you know, it could well be a unique style, or it's a bit Fernando Alonso-ish, given that Fernando has a bit of a lump as he's a spike as he's loading up the steering, whereas Lewis is still incredibly supple in that area, and the transition between straight line and applying steering, his transitions are seamless still, but he definitely has longer corners, and it generally seems to be braking late, doesn't he? So that's only because he's running longer corners, really, I guess. That's why we're seeing that. He's just doing more braking in a straight line. So I think that's what's happening. I think Lewis is actually changing his style this year. Changed past tense, or changed past participle, because that's the way he wants. That's the only way he can get this car to work. I think that's what's happening. So I don't think that's you know, something you should use as a comparison if you're thinking about Nigel or Michael, because Lewis to me is still an ultra short corner driver, which he was able to showcase so well in so many years in great racing cars. But when you don't have a great racing car, sometimes you have to go beyond that platform, and you start to have to do other things. And it's a sign of his talent that he can do that, actually. It's a bit like driving in the wet. You know, you don't see a lot of short corners in the wet, because that's not where the grip is. The grip is usually on the outside, away from the racing line. And if that's the case, you drive to that grip point, but then all the things that enable a Verstappen to get a car into his transition zone, his very supple hand and footwork, now allows him in the same way to get to that grip point on the outside of the corner in the wet in a very supple way, and he's just going quicker as a result. And that's what I think you're seeing a little bit with Lewis now in the dry. But Nigel was very short corners, and so was Michael, and so was Prost. But Prost always, I would say Prost was sort of 1 degree down from Nigel, maybe 2, in terms of how near the limit he was always going to tread. He was just left a little bit of margin, whereas Nigel was a short corner driver with no margin and incredible car control as well. I've seen Nigel, not many drivers can spin a Formula One car at the top of the hill going into Casino Square, do a 360 and keep going. I've seen Nigel do that, a Ferrari, and don't forget what he did against Berger in 90 at Imola, when Berger's in the McLaren, Nigel's in the Ferrari, and they're having a big dice for P3 or P2, and Berger just has him off in top gear at Tosa, before Tosa, and they're flat out, and Nigel goes on the grass 360 and keeps going, and the following lap, since his personal fastest lap of the race, he retired, but serious car control that. Danby Crowder. Hi, Danby Crowder. I'm just going to copy you and paste you, if that's all right. Here we go. Yeah, sorry about this little hiatus. I keep apologizing, but it's worth it. And if you've just joined, just to tell you that I'm being ultra clever tonight, and I'm getting all the questions up, the questions I'm talking about on the screen. But to do that, I have to trim them a bit. Not trim them, I have to just put them into lines that fit on the screen, because it won't give me a default that does that. So here we go. 1 second, just going to move that slightly to the right. There you go. Peter, how did Jody manage to run slicks in the opening half of the 79 South African Grand Prix and maintain his pace while others around him fell off the front? Gilles was impeccable on the wets. Yeah, very good. Very, very good car control by Jody. In general, he was very good. I mean, he, in the the Tyrrell once at Brands Hatch, when nobody could get tire temperature, there was Jody sort of 5 seconds a lap quicker than anybody, because he was getting it into the car. He was very good at leaning on the car and just getting things to work. And at the same time, in the wet, he was just fabulous car control. Having said all of that, Kyalami was an interesting circuit because it wasn't that slippery in the wet, had very good drainage, and it was the undulations were partly due to that, and also the South African ambience, and I guess the tarmac. I mean, I'm only sort of plunging in the dark there, but I guess the tarmac had something to do with it as well. But South Africa was a place where you could always take a risk if you wanted to, in a sort of, shall we go to slicks or not? And the good drivers usually went to slicks, and that's how Carlos won the 81 South African Grand Prix. Started on slicks in the wet and won the race, and it was the first 5 laps. He was pretty dodgy, but he had the car control and the feel to get away with it. And it was a little bit like that with Jody. I think it was that, and I think also the Michelin slick was a very, very, when it was right, it was a very good tire. From memory, it was the 05 that he was running, and it was a very, very good tire. Went off pretty quickly if it was abused, but in those conditions, damp and needing temperature to give you grip, it wasn't a bad tire at all. A lot of credit to, and they were radials too, compared with the cross pliers of Goodyear's at the time. So there was a lot that Jody could do then in 79. So it was a pretty good chuckable car too, that T4 Ferrari. Obviously it got overtaken in terms of technology by the ground effect Lotus 78, and at that stage Ferrari was struggling with ground effect, but in 79 it was a world championship tailor-made for Jody and Ferrari, really, and to some extent Gilles, but more Jody, because the season was divided into 2 halves. 8 races in each half, 16 races, and you only had to count 4 races from each half. So all they had to do was get the Michelins to work in 50% of the races in each half, and the job was done. And that's exactly what happened. The other half of each half, the Michelins were terrible, but it didn't matter. Bernie came up with that formula just to give Ferrari a chance to win the championship. Yeah, they were the days, I suppose you could say. Here's M.A. Khan. I knew he'd be back again with some more questions. Very good. No problem. So, here we go. 1 second. Get this going. Anyway, thanks for that one, Danby. It was good. As a matter of fact, just going back to that 79 South African Grand Prix, I think if you go to my channel, I've done a video about that race over the AP archive footage. I did a commentary. So if you search for that, I'm pretty sure it's there. And one of those wet Wednesday afternoons when I was looking for something to do, that's what I did. M.A. Khan, Peter, do you think drivers like Perez are better off sticking to their driving style rather than changing? Can you think of any drivers who have evolved from long corner drivers to short successfully? No, I think drivers of the talent of Perez can definitely change and work on various things. And they're never going to be completely natural drivers that would say, like Lewis or Max, but you can definitely, and he could massively improve, I think, if he worked on those specific parts of his palette, and by which I mean the artist palette, and I think that applies to a lot of the drivers in Formula One today. I think that they could all improve in a number of areas that they never look at because they're too involved with data, telemetry, what the engineers tell them they want, from the car, from them, where to brake, where not to brake, what gear to be in, what throttle opening to have. Everything is so microscopically managed that they lose the overall picture of where they could actually improve as a driver and do a better job. And of course they can all improve, definitely. And I think Perez, as I said, Perez would definitely be better off if he spent the August break solidly working on how to shorten his corner entries. He'd definitely be a better driver in the second half of the year. I would be shocked if he didn't find a 10th, if not 2/10 over the August break, if he worked on that. And without in any way changing what he does really well with the back of the car. And drivers evolve all the time in their own way, depending on the era they're in and the cars they've been driving. Obviously, if you've got a very difficult, unbalanced car with low levels of grip, it's not going to do a lot for your driving compared with Max, who's in a car that's very... usually, a high level of grip, which allows him to have a very good balance front to rear, and he doesn't have a complicated life in the team. He can just wake up in the morning, know what he's doing for the next 3, 4, 5 years, relax, think only of details. Not many drivers in at Formula One level can think that clearly. I mean, if you're Lewis, you're thinking, you're trying to live that life, but you're also thinking, how long am I going to have to put up with not having a race-winning car? Or if you're Charles, you're thinking, what is going on? Or if you're Oscar Piastri, you're thinking, I could have had Lando early on in Silverstone. There's a lot of other things, but Max never has those thoughts really, does he? He's just constantly thinking on his own driving. So it depends on the driver, depends on who they are. But I mean, if you wanted to think about, a classic driver who evolved was Francois Sever under the guidance of Jackie Stewart. Very different driver in 72, 73 to the Formula 2 driver he was in 69, 70. Completely different. And that shows how much you can develop as a driver, I think. And Denny Hulme, I think, is a driver that had the latent talent, great car control. But by 1972, when he won the South African Grand Prix, for example, he was a much more refined driver than he was in 1967 when he was winning Grand Prix as well. So he is a good example of a driver that can... And so, you're plucking names out of the past, Peter. Let's have some modern examples of that. And I think they go the other way, don't they? I think you see Valtteri Bottas being a much more compact driver in the late Williams, early Mercedes days than he is now. And I think that's due to not working as hard on his driving as he used to. So I think it's gone the other way with him. I think Carlos Sainz, as I said earlier, I think Carlos has actually improved. I wouldn't go so far as to say his corners are shorter now, but I think he's definitely more subtle and supple in the way he's driving and the way he's approaching corners. And that's part of that is methodology, part of that is just more and more miles in the car. So let's think of a driver who's actually Esteban Ocon. I think Esteban Ocon is a driver who has managed to become a much more compact driver now than he was when he first came into Formula One. When I saw him in Formula 3, GP3 probably was for the first time, he didn't stand out as a sort of middle of the road to short corner driver. He was pretty classic, and he seems to have developed a lot. So I think he's a good example of a driver that has improved in the last 3 or 4 years in Formula One. Impressively so, actually. Mike Spence was another one. I think Mike Spence just got better and better and better. By 68, sadly the year in which he was killed, he was really quick in that BRM. He was really quick. Peter Revson, another driver, yeah. Peter Revson was always a shortish corner driver, but he just got tighter and tighter, shorter and shorter, and more compact and more finessey the better the car he drove. And he ended up being so good in that McLaren M23. Yeah, he was really good. I was going to say Chris Amon, but Chris was always brilliant anyway, so, really miss Chris. What a driver he was. Shane Keenan. Shane. Let's have a look at if I can get this into this space here. This is where you all go off and have a quick drink, and I welcome you back when I get all the lines sorted. Go off and check the test match cricket score. No, don't tell me. Actually, I just hope it rains the next 3 days, all I can say. Shane Keenan. I'm going to move this to the right as well. There we go. Hi, Peter. Thank you for the content. Do you expect Aston to be back towards the podium positions this weekend? From what I tell, their package seems to suit Hungary quite well. Yeah, I'm sure they'll be really quick in Hungary again. As I said, after Silverstone, when we did the live stream, and indeed, the live stream, I guess. What was it? Even before the live stream? Yeah, maybe on a Saturday. That what we saw at Silverstone was... in those ambience with those compounds, we saw McLaren right in the sweet spot with that tyre. And I said at the time, I'm not sure, they probably don't know exactly how they found that sweet spot, but they certainly made very good use of it. And they alone really got the best from the tyres that weekend. Red Bull were almost there, but they were never 100% in the window. I think in Hungary, with the soft tyres, much higher ambience, I don't think McLaren will be uniquely in the sweet spot of the tyres. I think everyone will more or less find the sweet spot, and you'll find it much closer. That's my prediction. I may well be wrong. I mean, if McLaren are easily second to Red Bull again and blow everybody away, wow, then we can stand back and say whatever they've done to that car has obviously worked and they're way ahead of everybody else. But my feeling, my prediction, it's only my prediction, who am I to predict anything anyway, but my prediction is that they will, everyone will be kind of where they normally are, and McLaren will have certainly Aston Martin, Mercedes, and possibly Alpine to deal with around Hungary in the normal way, and Ferrari as well. Shouldn't forget Ferrari, I suppose. And it'll be much closer. Having said that, you know, that whole new qualifying thing of everybody on the medium in Q1 may put a different complexion on things. It could be that Ferrari just can't get the hard tyre to work, or McLaren can't get the hard tyre to work, but we'll see. It's difficult to imagine Aston Martin, the sort of car they have, the grip and balance level they have, obviously with some upgrades as well. Everybody's bringing upgrades, including Red Bull. It's difficult to imagine that Aston Martin won't be really good around Hungary. And if they are, that's, it's going to be interesting, I think. Fernando won here, didn't he? It was his first win. When was that? 2003, I think. So, yeah, it'd be nice for him to come back. Wow. 20 years. 20 years in Formula One. Think of that. I mean, okay, Fangio did the odd race back end of... Did he? Yeah, sort of late 40s, but he didn't really start until, let's call it 50. And he retired in end of 57, did a couple of races in 58, but so 7 years. And Fernando's been in Formula One 20 years. I mean, Jim Clark, first Grand Prix 1960, last Grand Prix January 68, 8 years. Fernando Alonso, 20 years. Not the only one to have had such a long career, but I mean, that's where this whole business of comparing one era, drivers from one era with another are completely ridiculous. Look how many more races Fernando's had in a much safer era. So you can compare him in a number of ways, but don't compare him with stats because they don't mean very much. Actually, speaking of stats, I was speaking of stats. I was reading through, again, one of these moments when obviously I didn't have very much to do. In fact, I might even try and dig it out. It was the Mercedes pre-Hungarian Grand Prix press release thing, and what the Hungarian Grand Prix preview. Here you go, and they pride themselves on doing a really good job with stats, and I'm sure, being Mercedes, they're all 100% accurate. So I never really read these things because stats are stats, and if you need them or want them, they're always there. Anyway, it's nice that they do it. Thank you very much, Mercedes. So here we go. This is the all-time Formula One, Mercedes in Formula One, okay? Starts 281. Podium places 286. And I looked at that and I thought, is that a misprint or what? What's going on there? poles 136, wins 125, podium places 286, starts, all-time starts 281. Of course, what that means is that they're counting a start as every time Mercedes enter a Grand Prix, and then they're adding up the number of podiums and wins they get as a result, which is why there are more, well, the reason there are more podiums than there are starts is because quite obviously they have a lot more cars entered starting a race, and they have actual entries as Mercedes. So sometimes it's a 4-car team, sometimes a 3-car team, sometimes a 2-car team. And I think, well, you know, to me, for that to be an accurate stat, really a start should be every start that a Mercedes car has made, and then let's see how many podium finishes they've had. Because, you know, you enter enough cars, you're going to have enough podium finishes if you like. So, yeah, that was my thinking on that. I hope you understand where I'm coming from there. I just think if you're going to have those sorts of stats and obviously try to make them look good, what is the point of having more podium finishes than you have actually starts in the race? Bear in mind, you know, they certainly ran 3 cars quite a lot of the time in the 50s. BRM ran 5 cars in 72, most of 72. So, I mean, if you looked at the BRM stats, it's, you know, how many races did they enter? Oh, yeah, we entered the Belgian Grand Prix 72. They had 5 cars in that race. You know, there's a reasonable chance they're going to get a podium. Not that they did, but I just think stats, basically these days, a bit like a survey, isn't it? The stats you can make to read whatever you want and make them read. Equally, I think there's quite a lot of conjecture about the 800 race starts by Williams as well. And when did Williams actually start? I mean, that's another thing. That 800th race thing. Are they not including Frank's brilliant performance from 69 through to, well, I guess 1977, when he ran, well, he actually ran his own cars for a while in that period too. So you can't even say, oh, well, that was a customer car period, because 73, 74, 75, the Williams was actually a Williams, designed by John Clark, I recall. Yeah, John Clark. So why are they not included? Oh, well, that was before the team was reborn. Yeah, right. Okay. I was going to say it's a bit like surveys. You know, the answer you get is based entirely on the question you ask, isn't it? With a survey, you can get them to say anything. Do you want to have sprint racing in Formula One if it means a lot more overtaking? Yes. Do you want to have sprint racing in Formula One if it means that the car's going to Parc Ferme after first practice and they can't touch them again for the rest of the weekend, and your favourite team might be therefore stuff for the rest of the weekend? No. Yeah, right. Bit like Brexit, isn't it? Yeah, we won't go down that path. Not allowed to talk about politics. Bovemd01. Hi, Peter. Big fan. Do you believe Lewis can win an 8th title before retiring? I hope so. I think only because I think he won that 8th title in Abu Dhabi and was snatched away from him. I'm not saying you win and lose a title in one race. What I am saying is he won that Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, I think, and it was just a ludicrous decision, bad decision made at the wrong time, and he wasn't given enough backup by his team to get that result back. He won that race as well as he'd won any Grand Prix in his career, in my view. And as it happened, it just happened to affect the outcome of the World Championship. But I would feel just as strongly about that race had it not affected the World Championship. If it had been race 5, I would have felt just as strongly about everything that happened. Just as I still feel very strongly about the penalty that Carlos Sainz got in Melbourne for, doing something nothing like as bad as Lance Stroll taking out Fernando Alonso in the US Grand Prix by running into him on the straight and just getting a grid penalty for the next race. And, I thought that was really poor as well. Has it affected Lewis's confidence performance in both 2023? No, I don't think so. I think the only thing that's affected his performance has been the car in 2022 and 23. And I think given all the traumas of Abu Dhabi, plus not being able to continue to run Valtteri in the other car, which he wanted to do, and he was overruled and they signed George, who's a lot more difficult to beat than Valtteri was. From Lewis's point of view, that's cramped his style a bit as well. at a time when he's suddenly having to qualify, fifth or sixth or fourth, or struggling sometimes to get through to Q2, even little in Q3 in a bad car. You don't need a team, you just want everyone to be focused on that problem, not anything else. But he's always had to deal with this other thing as well. So a lot going on with Lewis. All I'm saying is I think he's driven incredibly well, given all of that, and given the 7 titles he's got already and how long he's been around as well. Almost as long as Fernando, not quite. And but blame everything on the car. Don't blame anything on Lewis in terms of the poor performances this year. Hasn't affected him at all. In fact, listening to Carlos Alcaraz after his brilliant win at Wimbledon, beating Novak Djokovic, listening to Novak's speech, to be honest, listening to Novak's speech and his humility and the praise he heaped upon Alcaraz, it reminded me actually of Lewis's demeanour after that Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 21, because I know a lot of drivers who would have been ranting and raving after that race, after what happened to him, and he wasn't. He was very dignified, and he kind of stood there and let it all happen. And I thought that was, it reminded me of that situation anyway, of how well Djokovic spoke. Reminded me of Lewis, Abu Dhabi. So another one. I'm not sure we're going to get, it's going to be the usual old story. I'm not sure we're going to get through all the questions, so I'm going to start apologising in advance, only because I have got to go and do this next call. Again, another F1 exhibition call, and I can't be late for that. This looks like a Horner Perez type question. So where do we go? Good evening, Peter. Hi there. Assuming Danny Rick is gunning for the second seat at Red Bull, and Horner stating that Perez will still be at Red Bull in 24, do you think Daniel will have the patience to stay at Alpha Tauri? I don't think he is gunning for the seat at Red Bull. I think wouldn't he be thinking, been there, done that? That's why I left in the first place. I don't want to be shown up by Max, but at Alpha Tauri I can be quite a big fish in a small pond, and I'm going to enjoy this. And if ever they need someone to step in and do something at Red Bull, they know they've got a good reliable Aussie they can put in the car. If there's whatever, Sergio or Max unwell for a weekend, that's the driver they'll probably put in the car, isn't it? And I think he's very comfortable with this situation, because what he's got to do is get the team back to heading in the right direction. That's how he will see it anyway, and help them along. How he'll react. I mean, he's not even going to be upset, I think, if Yuki out-qualifies him or even out-races him, which he's got a good chance of doing, because he's actually racing very well now, and he's not slow, is he, Tsunoda? Daniel will say, well, I'm not up to speed yet. I'm just coming into the team. Give me a chance. So he hasn't got any pressure on him whatsoever, actually. And I think he'll love being in that Italian team. Italian hereditary anyway, pasta. He'll be loving it. I don't think he'll be thinking, I want the second seat at Red Bull, because he's got all his money in the bank, hasn't he, which he'll love. And I think he'll just be so happy to be in that situation. And he'd be very happy, if as I say, if Checo gets a cold and can't race, and the phone rings and they want him in that Red Bull for a race, he'll love it. Of course he will. He'll do it. Again, there'll be no pressure on him, just as there's no pressure on him now. And it's a perfect thing for him. But remember, he was at Red Bull and he left Red Bull because he couldn't handle Max beating him. In his mind, he said, the whole team is orientated toward Max. I've got no chance. Everything's for Max. But the reality was that was not the case. There were still opportunities for Daniel to win races and do well. It's a very good team, Red Bull. And he walked away from the team to a lesser team for a lot more money. And it's always a bad thing to do, in my view. A bit like Damon Hill, who nearly won Hungary in the Arrows, a bit like him leaving Williams because he wasn't happy with the money. That wasn't a clever move either. Yeah, amazing, isn't it? How Damon lost that race on the last lap. What was it? Hydraulics or something ridiculous went. Just crazy. How did he lead that race in the Arrows? Was it Yamaha engine as well, wasn't it? What's that all about? How did that happen? One of the great unknowns of Formula One history, isn't it? How did Damon Hill manage to nearly win the Hungarian Grand Prix? What's that, 1997, I think it was? Mate Gergo Hovarth. Dear Peter, what was it like for you working for Williams and managing Nigel, and how did the race week go down from your perspective? Thanks. It was great. I was very lucky to be working for Frank at that time. I'd known Frank since 1972 when I came over as a kid to try and get a job in motor racing, and started writing in Formula One. Got to know Frank very early on then, and we used to go running together, and quite often we would meet up at races, have dinner, eat in the caravan, whatever. So I would say of all the team people, Frank was one of my closest friends. And funnily enough, I mean, this sounds incredibly arrogant, I suppose, but funnily enough, in 1984, I received offers from both Ron Dennis and Frank Williams to work for them as head of sponsorship. And I was very tempted to go and work for Ron, because I just loved the way Ron worked and what he was doing at McLaren and how clean and organized everything was. But on the other side, there was chaotic Frank, who was just a real friend. And so I ended up, I went to work for Frank. And we just had all those great years together. And I went, and along the way, I met this driver called Nigel Mansell, saw him at Thruxton in 78. And immediately it was clear that he was a short corner driver of enormous talent and potential. Got to know him. It was the last race he was doing in 78, because that was the budget run out, the money he gave to March. He did 5 races at the start of the year. He didn't race again that year. So I got to know him really well that year. Went up to Hall Green in Birmingham and hung out with him and helped him write 100, 200, 300 sponsorship letters. And we were just like brothers, really. And so that's when I got to know Nigel. And then I was lucky enough to be able to take Nigel to Williams, eventually convince Frank to take Nigel against Frank's better judgment and Patrick's, but I kind of forced the issue, really. And then having forced that issue, then eventually to win the World Championship when I was team manager at Williams then in 92, it was, that was one of the great moments of my life. It was, and I'm very lucky and blessed to have gone through that, because the odds of working for a great Formula One team at the time when a driver that you've kind of met long before anybody else knew he even existed and brought him into that team, and he's won the championship in your car, in the car that the team's running, is, it's pretty small odds for that happening. And I was right there. It was just incredible. So yeah, it was amazing. And being there, what was it like? It was a blur, obviously. I mean, when you're traveling as much as we did, and bear in mind, we didn't race as much, but we tested a massive amount, and I managed the test team as well under Brian Lambert. Well, Brian Lambert was the test team chief mechanic, and we did a lot of testing, often 2 cars at a test as well. We had a spare car. So I was in charge of, about 65, going on 70 people, race and test team. And it was just every weekend, basically, we were doing something. And so the time just passed like that. It was, I was in the army a little bit, and it was a bit like that, very regimented, at the track super early, last to leave at night, everything done by the clock. If everything was done in a very organized way, the day kind of passed in its own fashion. And I always felt I was doing my job well if there were no dramas. And if there was a drama, it meant that I hadn't anticipated that drama and predicted it. So yeah, it was a learning experience. Not something I want to do for the rest of my life, which is why I didn't do it for very long. And after we won the championship in 92, I took a kind of sabbatical and went to America for a couple of years and hung out at IndyCar, got to know everybody there, loved it. And came back, had a couple of attempts to do my own F1 team. Kind of got halfway down the road, but not 100%. And here I am now. So there we go. lot more to talk about at some point, but thank you for the question. Very nice question to talk about. The same question for you, from you again, but it looks like a good question from what I can see. So I say it's from what I can see before I've really read it up here. I'm just going to put this on as well. So here we go, another question. How can someone know if he or she has a talent for racing? Can it be seen in road car driving? Is go-kart the best option for development? Many thanks. Well, in answer to the last part of the question, absolutely karting is the best way now to get into racing. If you enjoy karting and you enjoy the feel of sliding a kart and pitching it and all the things you need to do to get a kart to work, and the track craft involved in winning a kart race, if you enjoy all that and you just crave it, then you're on the right track straight away. Karting will definitely be sending you the right messages. Going back to the beginning of the question, it's a more difficult question to answer because as Dennis Jenkinson once said memorably in Motorsport magazine, and I'm referring to the doyen of British motor racing journalists, somewhere in the middle of Siberia, a driver better than Fangio is spending his life cutting down trees and living in a log hut, doesn't know that he's a racing driver or could be a racing driver. And that's the big conundrum, isn't it, about sport in general, more so about motor racing, because if you were born to be a great tennis player, at some point probably you're going to come into contact with a ball with a stick and you're going to hit it and you're going to think, oh wow, I can do that quite well. But the odds of actually, if you're a great Grand Prix driver and you live in the middle of nowhere and you've never seen a motor race and you've never driven a car, it's a little bit more difficult to know that you are the next Max Verstappen. So how do you do that? Well, on the assumption that we got to cut corners a little bit and they get into a road car. Definitely in a road car, in my experience, great Grand Prix drivers drive with incredible smoothness and judgment in every way. Clutch take up, if it's a manual transmission car, acceleration, braking application, steering, everything is incredibly soft and seamless. No lumps at all. Whilst they're talking, looking out the window and doing a million other things, it's just happening to them completely naturally. Also, they're all very, very good at perfect reverse parking, handbrake turns, all the things that maybe the average road user finds quite difficult. Reverse parking, good example, or reversing a car in a very tight space for a long period of time. Those things great Grand Prix drivers find completely natural and totally easy and no problem at all. And their judgment through tiny gaps is perfect. I think I've told the story once on this live stream, I'll do it again, about when I knew Ayrton Senna very well in his early days when he was in Formula 3. And I went out to dinner with him one night and he was in an Alpha Sud TI and he had it parked outside the restaurant. No, it was outside his house actually, we went in it. And I said, Ayrton, what's going on here? Both mirrors were cracked, big cracks, but the casings of the mirrors were undamaged. And I said, wow, what's happened here? That's amazing. And he said, I went through a gap and it was just big enough, but it touched either side enough to smash the mirrors, but only just lightly grazed the casing. I thought, wow, that's impressive. That's how fine his judgment was. And so it goes. I remember driving with Niki Lauda once in Uruguay in a very battered old VW Passat. And even then, everything was silky smooth. The gear changing, the clutch, the hands, and he was looking out the window 99% of the time, just driving like this, corner of his eye. Everything was just perfect. Nothing forced, all fingertips. Gilles Villeneuve, again, similar thing. I drove on the road many times with Gilles, and he's famous for being completely crazy. But everything he did was beautiful to watch. Everything happened in slow motion. He had time to do everything. The judgment was perfect. Everything was fingertippy. And he always had both hands on the wheel at any stage of what he was doing. And it was, unlike Nicky, who had one hand on the wheel, one hand doing I don't know what, but Gilles was always two hands on the wheel. And you can tell a lot about drivers by looking at them in a road car and what they're doing. A and B, if you are driving a road car and you're wondering if you can be a racing driver, there's a few checklist points you can look at on your own driving. I mean, does it send a shudder through you every time if you've got a manual transmission car if you don't get the revs absolutely perfect on the up and down shifts and whilst you're heel and toeing on the down shifts? Because it should. It's like playing a wrong note in a piano, as Ayrton used to say. So there's a lot you can do in a road car, and that's why Rob Wilson actually uses road cars, absolutely standard Fords, modern Fords, but standard ones for his driver training, because you can tell so much. And actually a slight error in a driver's style will show up more in a road car because it's a sloppy, slow thing, whereas a racing car is very taut and happens very quickly and you can get away with it. That's kind of the mentality. And I remember once at a Rob Wilson day, he was talking about weight transfer under braking and how important it was to get the weight correct before you really braked hard. You just warm the pedal and get the front of the car down. And the driver said, "Oh, well, that doesn't count because in Formula One, there's no weight transfer. The nose doesn't drop." And Rob said, "Well, excuse me, there is weight transfer. It just happens unbelievably quickly. But of course, there's weight transfer." And the guy said, "Oh, yeah, maybe you're right. I hadn't thought of that." That's why I say a lot of them could just benefit from going back to fundamentals and just doing things that are logical and make sense. So this is a great question. You can go on forever. So many things. I drove with Sterling Moss once on the road, and exactly the same thing. Incredible judgment through tiny gaps, parking particularly, very nimble, always looking 5 streets ahead where he was going. Excellent. Thank you for that question. Let's have more like that. I love questions like that. I love driving with Grand Prix drivers. I remember driving with Carlos Reutemann in my Fiat 131 Mirafiori Sport around Brands in the wet. Just brilliant. Oh, those are the moments when you think, no, I'm never going to be a racing driver of note anyway. I can't do this. Can't do what he's doing. No way. Which of the cars will be best suited for the Hungaroring? Greetings from Hungary. It's all slow corners. Well, not all slow corners. There's a lot of slow corners. Traction. It's very. I mean, let's talk about reliability, because reliability is a bit of an issue. We saw in Canada a few people have brake problems, and brakes are very, very stressed in Hungary. So that's the first thing. You've got to be really good reliability and consistency under braking, technically speaking, mechanically speaking. Speed through the air, in other words, low drag, isn't a massive thing in Hungary. It's more braking and then getting the power down well. But what does getting the power down well mean? It means getting into the corner well, obviously, and having a nice transition zone where you can have the time to find the diagonal exit you need. So that means a car with great turn-in. So what are you talking about? You're talking about a Red Bull, you're talking about a Aston Martin, probably McLaren, I would guess now. Interesting to see how they will compare with the Aston, now that everyone will be on softer tyres and it won't be such a drama to get it at the right temperatures for the tyres. Ferrari, let's hope they've got a decent car. I can see them struggling, but I hope not. With that, probably. Alpine historically seem to go quite well there, don't they? So they might go well. It's going to be, there is no magic. And I think you see a lot of teams, and I often I'm a bit cynical about teams when they say, they always say it after the event, and they never say it before. They always say after the event, having got through Austria and Silverstone, it'll be really good to get back to a track that suits our car more. I mean, what does that mean? This is a track where I don't know what it means. I'm still trying to work out what it means. But they love saying that, don't they? Because I think it's being really positive to say that. But they never say going into Silverstone, this is a terrible track for us and we're going to be hopeless there. In the hope that they might not be. So I think I read through. I think this morning I didn't have much to do. I read through most of these previews, and they all said, "Oh, it'd be good to get back to a track where we think we can go really well." They're all saying that. So it'll be down to who gets into. Let's think about the lap. I think turn one, very, very wide turn one, isn't it? It's quite a long run down there. It's downhill braking, very easy to lock up. If you don't have a nice sweet spot under braking and you try to brake really late as a long corner driver, you'll lock up for sure going in there periodically. It's a good corner for short corner drivers, turn one. And there's a lot of width there as well, so you can get around on the outside of people without too much drama if you know what you're doing. Into turn two, again, it's a downhill thing and it's a long corner, but again, Formula One being what it is today, if you put your car on the outside there, everybody's so paranoid now about getting a penalty that you've got away with it and you're on the inside for turn three, which is a flat out kink. And then there's the really only good corner in Hungary, in my view, which is that next left-hander, the fifth gear, really quick corner. Probably fifth gear probably. Turn four, left-hander, really good. Love that corner. And then they go through that long right-hander. So that fourth gear, that quick corner Max will be really good through there for sure. The next corner is just a long corner that'll really eat your tyres up if you are asking too much of them going in. And then you got all those dinky chicanes and stuff, which are all Sergio Perez-y areas in terms of traction. Just get the car in, get the power nicely out of there. Then there's quite a quick right-hander, which is... what car will that... I don't think that right-hander will be too discerning of all the cars, actually. I think it's a sort of corner where most cars and drivers will be pretty similar. There's not a lot you can do there. It's quite quick. Then there's that long straight down to that right-hander at the bottom of the hill. Again, that's a corner where I think you can brake too late into that if you are a late braker. But if you're a Max, that's where you'll score in the race, particularly because you won't abuse your tyres too much into there. And you'll be braking with a much nicer sweet spot with your longer straight there, and possibly braking a little bit earlier than most, but you'll reap the benefits coming out. Then the second last left-hander, quite a good corner, that one, because you can kind of pitch it in there a little bit and get away with it. So you'll see the car control drivers, the sciences will look quite good into that one. But the key in many ways to the lap, I think, then comes, which is the exit of that second last corner, that short straight before the last corner, which is a very annoying long right-hander. I think it's constant radius almost. And the key coming out of that previous corner is, it's a bit like the Rascasse, exit of Rascasse. You got that little bit of straight and you really want to have a perfect exit from there in terms of a really straight line exit, and then move across to the left for that last corner at the last possible comfortable moment, rather than just come out and weave back to the left, which is what a lot of normal drivers will do. But the great drivers will all be finding a lovely rotation, Max will there, and just get a straight exit, and then you'll stay on that straight line, absolutely hammering the car under acceleration. And that's where Perez won't be able to do much, because Max will be really good there with his rotation. Perez will be good through the sort of jinky 90-degree lefts and rights at the top of the hill, the top of the circuit. Then that last corner, just be patient. Be super patient. Don't use a lot of road going in. Don't make it a long corner. Don't abuse the left front going in. Just get the car tucked in, be patient, and then get a lovely diagonal exit as well. And that's your lap. And it's Max will be very good on those last two corners, and I think he can be about the same as Perez through most of the other corners and still be quicker just through those last two. One will be, it's so wide there, and it's so, I don't know what it is. It's just high speed braking, but you can get away with it. He won't have a huge advantage over Perez there, I don't think. It'll all be in those last two corners, particularly if the tyres are so soft with the softs on that they can't even do a full lap. And Max for sure will be thinking last two corners. This is what the pole is all about. It's making sure the tyres are right in those last two corners. That's what I think will happen. Right, here's a good name. Tacitus G. Gilco. Wow. Very honoured to have you, sir. Where are we? Here we go. Just going to condense these down to the right lengths so everybody can read it without too much. Okay. This is a bit of a, it's not a real question. I'm not sure I should put it as sort of a comment to everybody else, is it? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's many people front load the chat with so many questions before the stream. Let him talk for a bit. He might answer some of them in his preamble. Okay, I mean, I'm not going to get involved in that. I'm so unused to live streaming that I don't know what the normal protocol is, but I'm always very touched that a lot of people do seem to have a lot of questions. Oh, and here I'm seeing now, because we haven't got that much time left, I'm seeing some coloured questions, which I should have seen earlier. I've been so preoccupied with my new system of getting the question up there that I haven't actually taken. Normally they come up the top to tell you there's some coloured questions, where I will actually answer those now. So here we go. Here we go. Sorry, I'm just going to copy this one. So this is from Rasta McNaster. I can't actually, with the system I've got, Rasta, I can't actually put your name on it because your name is separate from the text, if you see what I mean. But I can certainly... sorry, I forgot to copy that one. Let me have another go. Not doing very well here. I'm kind of discombobulated by the discovery of these coloured questions. So I'm going to try it again. Copy. Maybe, this is a point, maybe it won't copy because it's on a coloured background. That could be the case. Oh no, here we go. Thanks for great analysis. Frustrating watching Formula One on TV, hearing vague talk about straight line speed without showing real data. What's going on? Hi there. Well, thanks for that. I don't know. What can I say? I try to be as accurate as I can with straight line speed data, and recently I think I've upped the amount of data that I'm putting out on a Friday and a Saturday. So all I can say is I will continue to do that. I'm not sure that, I mean, it's quite difficult to read it all, isn't it? Because sometimes it's quite clear on a Friday, for example, you look at speeds at the end of sector 3, which is generally the start finish line. And then let's say they're all in the 320 area, and you think, oh yeah, well that's obviously the DRS open, and then somebody comes through at 295 and you think, what's going on? And so I don't know. All I can assume is that sometimes the top speeds where the trap is, somebody comes out of a corner slowly enough and they haven't got the DRS open or something. I don't know. There seem to be some anomalies in the whole top speed thing that is put out in terms of the data that we get to see. That's really, I suppose, one of the issues, and it's not always clear because the trap speeds don't seem to, when they're published, don't seem to bear any relation to the top speeds that are shown on the lap by lap analysis of the data when it's actually happening in real time. That's another weird thing. And nor, actually, while I'm at it, do the top speeds that we see in the published data actually correlate very well to the top speeds we see when we're on board and they actually show the top speed with a graphic coming out of the cockpit. So it's all a bit of a mystery. I think the safest thing is to look at trends, which is what I try to do when I'm analysing the data. I try to look at trends rather than look at specific numbers, because I think a lot of it is quite spurious. So, and I tell you something else that's not very accurate is the tyre stuff. When they're showing you what tyres the driver is on, classic example was Monaco, was it 2 years ago when they had all that drama with the intermediates, and they had Lando starting on slicks, and it was on there, slicks, but it wasn't. So, you've got to be careful of that as well. And I went quite far down the road of that, how that happened, and everybody blamed everybody else. Oh, well, we get it from Pirelli. And Pirelli said, oh, we get it from F1. So nobody knew what was going on. I'm not sure they still do either. This is from Mustafa Siraj. Hi there. Another great question. Thank you very much. This is, I'm just going to get this one sorted as well. Trimmed, is that the right way? If Merck delivered, I was going to get, sorry, I'll just move this a little bit more that way. There we go. If Merck delivered a competitive car next year, who would win the championship? Also, my wife is asking, how do you care for your lower eyelid? Down here, you mean? Yeah, I occasionally have issues there. I don't do much, really. I'm just an Australian boy who just does what he does. You know, I don't put any of that stuff on my face. Is that what you're talking about? I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, I won't go too much further into that one. If Merck had a competitive car next year, who would win the championship? Well, I've always said it's one thing to have George Russell in there because he's one of the great drivers of the future, enormous talent, super quick, much quicker than Valtteri Bottas. And it's and to have them in mediocre cars when they're not fighting for race wins, but to have Lewis and George in race-winning, potentially championship-winning cars, completely different story, and would be a very, very difficult management problem. And I still don't know why they went down that path, because if you got Max, you don't put George in the other car. If you got Lewis, you don't put George in the other car. That's my assessment of that. But I know they think, oh, well, we want the two best drivers because of the Constructors' Championship. Well, you know, Max isn't doing a bad job on his own winning the Constructors' Championship. So I would like to think Lewis would do it over a season and would be right there. But, you know, he's been around a long time, and George is young and hungry and, you know, mega quick. I don't know. I don't even want to think about that one because it makes me sick, makes me nervous thinking about it. But thank you. So here's another one from M.A. Khan. I'm going for the ones with colour now because I haven't got a lot more. We've got another half an hour to go, but I know we're going to be short of time at the end, so I just want to get these done. Where are we? This is from M.A. Khan. Let me get this done. So here we go. I'll move this one to the left a bit and we can all see the last word. Just maybe make it a bit smaller. Pretty cool, eh? Here you go. I just want to say, this is M.A. Khan, I just want to say a big thank you for all your videos. Thank you very much. All a labour of love, you know, so you don't need to thank me. You've inspired me to study Jim Clark and Sterling Moss. I hope you write a book one day on driving styles from the 60s to the present. Well, yeah, you know, it's a nice idea, isn't it? What they had to do. I mean, that business of the accelerator being in a different position relative to the brake in two consecutive races in two types of cars and having to live with that. Here's something else. This is really weird as well. I think I've made this point a few times, but remember that when Jim Clark and Graham Hill and Jackie Stewart all went to, not Jackie so much, but because he wore seatbelts when he came back into Formula One, but Graham Hill and Jimmy, particularly when they did Indy, Denny Hulme and a few others, all wore seatbelts when they were at Indy, and Milwaukee or Trenton, wherever else they were racing, or indeed in the big sports car races as well, Riverside and so forth. Then when they came back to Europe, they didn't wear belts. They just thought, oh, it's an American thing, and we don't have to wear belts here. And the reason they didn't wear belts is that they were conditioned into believing, having seen so many accidents graphically in front of them, that it was always better to be thrown out of a car than to be trapped in a car if it caught fire. So it never really entered their heads to wear seatbelts in Europe, but they wore them in America. So it still blows my mind to think that Jim Clark won the Indy 500 in '65 with seatbelts in the Lotus 38, and then shortly afterwards, a couple of months later, won the World Championship at the Nürburgring Nordschleife in a Lotus 33, not wearing seatbelts around the North Circuit of the Nürburgring. I mean, I can imagine the difference. Anyway, I'll tell you where they did wear seatbelts, though, in Europe. And this I discovered also in the Pete Coltrane book. There's a picture of Luigi Musso in the Ferrari that he drove in that race of two worlds at Monza, going around the banking the wrong way. And he's wearing seatbelts in the Ferrari. And yet the following week, or a month later, he was in the Ferrari Formula One car at rounds, not wearing seatbelts and getting thrown out and being killed. And yet he was wearing seatbelts at Monza because the Americans were there, and part of their rule system was that they all had to wear belts. So he's wearing a proper shoulder harness in the Ferrari at Monza. Incredible, isn't it? That affects style, believe me, because security in the car and feeling the car and all the things that come with feeling a part of the car affect the way you drive the car and what you can do with the car. But thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I hope you enjoy your study of Jim Clark and Stirling Moss, two of the greatest Grand Prix drivers of all time, no question about that. And the fact that Stirling never won the World Championship should never be forgotten by every racing fan with blood in their veins, because we are completely obsessed these days with the championship and the point system. And yet Stirling was out there racing sometimes just to win and sacrificing other aspects of his career and just to win sometimes in what he considered to be a British car, which was his thing, you know. But that's not to say he didn't drive foreign cars as well. Of course he did, but you know, his view was every race is important. The championship's just all points at the end, doesn't mean a lot. So that should always be respected, I think, if nothing else, if not and remembered. So thank you very much. This is Michael Thomas Smith. Thank you, Michael, for this question as well. Let's have a look, see what. I've just got to replace that one with this one. I'm sorry, just getting there now. You must be getting sick of just watching my face doing this, but anyway, there is no way around it. Go away and have a quick coffee. Okay. Enjoy your thoughtful and sophisticated commentary. Thank you very much. I'd love to hear your take on how some longer cornered drivers can be quicker than some of their shorter cornered peers. Well, you know, Ayrton Senna was not a short corner driver, so that's how a longer corner driver can be quicker than their peers. What he did to perfection, or usually to perfection, and was on the absolute limit of everything he did. As I said before, you know, if the margin was 2 centimeters, Ayrton would leave 1 centimeter, or if it was 1 centimeter, he'd leave a half a centimeter. And if the rev limit was 16.3, he would go to 16.301. And that's the way he was. He was absolutely on the limit with his own body as well. You know, if he felt he could get a little bit more out of his brain by holding his breath for as long as he could through the qualifying lap, he would do it. So that's how a longer corner driver can get the better of a short corner driver. And you saw it at McLaren. I mean, he was a longer corner driver than Alan Prost, no doubt about that. And Prost would always leave a little bit of a margin, and he was lovely and cushy with the car. Everything was soft and svelte and short corners and incredibly repeatable in the way he drove the car. He could just get into a rhythm because of that. Whereas Ayrton was always on the edge and always had to sort of react to things that were going around him on the edge, which is why he was pretty much shattered after every race. Even Formula 3, he was pretty shattered by the end of any Formula 3 race, let alone Formula 1, because he just gave 100%, A, for the quick lap, and then B, in reacting to everything that was going on around him, inventing new ways of coping with that and having to deal with that. And so, you know, he wasn't always comfortable in the cars either. He needed to feel the cockpit as much as he could, up and down his spine, through the backs of his legs, his arms, his shoulders, and that often meant being fairly spare in the cockpit and not having a lot of padding anywhere. He just wanted to feel everything, and because of that, he felt shattered after a race as well, and often not injured, but often he had hurt himself, pull a muscle or do this, or the neck or something like that. So that was an example of how a long corner driver could beat virtually everyone. I think, you know, I say that, you know, when it was fair and square, Nigel was the guy that gave Ayrton the biggest trouble, because he was virtually the equivalent of a short corner of Ayrton in a short corner form, and if you're doing the short corner form, it is always going to be slightly better over a distance, or indeed possibly even over one lap, given the nature of the circuit and the types of cars they were in. So yeah, there was an example. I mean, Graham Hill was definitely not a short corner driver, and he was very quick, 64, 65 in that 2 litre, 1.5 litre BRM. Sorry, 1.5 litre BRM. He was really quick. If you think of, say, the 64, well, Dan was really quick as well. Dan was pretty short corner. Graham, 64 Belgian Grand Prix was good. I mean, he was really quick and hard to beat. You know, hard for a driver like Jim Clark to beat, because he was good. You know, he was great. He was right on the limit all the time. Very good car control. Very soft inputs as well. Nothing jerky about the way Graham Hill drove. That was his greatest quality. Many examples. I'm not doing it. I mean, there's two straight off the bat. Yeah, I don't think Felipe Massa was the shortest corner driver I've ever seen, and he took it to Michael a few times, didn't he? And he was good. He was really good when when the car was right and he could Turkey, and he got the tyres managed really well. He was very good. Very good. Nelson Piquet, long corner driver. Nigel Mansell, short corner driver. But then Nigel was, dare I say it, always quicker. So it wasn't really, isn't it an illustration of the point you're trying to make? But Ayrton was the best example. It's not true. I mean, Nelson was quick on occasions, wasn't he? Let's think where he was. Hungary had that ridiculous advantage with the diff, but there were moments when he was quite quick compared with Nigel, I suppose. Relatively quick. No, they weren't. Nigel was always quicker, I think. Generally speaking, Piquet fans weren't like that, but I think when they were the fair comparison, I think Nigel was always there, just ahead of him doing the job. So there we go. Where did I get to? And before we got to all these nice coloured questions, I'm not quite sure how far we got. Only way I can find where I was is to read through a question and see, of course, whether I've seen it. Some very funny comments here. One of them says, "Evening, Peter, just settling in for my, I don't know, something or other." It's actually gone back to the point where I'd read them all. That's quite clever. How's it done that? I can't read that. I can't understand that. Anyway, here's the next one, which is it's from Diego Marino. Hey Diego, good man. He's based in Madrid, I know. Saying hi, mate. Following you from very hot Madrid. Yeah, hi, mate. Yeah, it is very hot here as well. It had the really. It was over 40. It was 42 when I got in the car yesterday. But yeah, that was on the way to the golf course, and we still played. So there you go. There's dedication for you. Should I be saying that? I've been telling everybody how hard I've been working, haven't I? Yeah, right, Windsor. Okay. Here's another one. This is from DDLKR. Now they're up there. You can see why I sometimes have trouble with the pronunciation of these names. Have you seen Red Bull's new side pods? Thoughts to performance for Hungary? No, I haven't yet. No, so I'll have to make some comments when. You guys have been able to flick through Twitter or whatever whilst this is going on, looking at the cars going down to Parc Ferme, I guess. I haven't seen them, so I'm looking forward to that. Was it Shub predicted what Adrian was going to be looking for? He did a really good piece on the Friday of, was it Silverstone or maybe Austria, saying this is probably where Red Bull will be going with their pods. What Adrian, something to do with the floor and getting the air, doing a bit more around the back of the floor, I think, something like that. So that's maybe what Adrian's doing. he's pretty plugged into what Red Bull are doing. So definitely, I'm not sure Shub's going to be doing anything this weekend. I think he's tied up, but we'll certainly do something at Spa, the other half of the double header. So there you go. Next one is, do you still think George is faster than Lewis? I don't think I've ever said that he's faster than Lewis. All I've said was he's not the teammate Lewis wants in the other car because he's faster than Valtteri. That's what I've always said. I never said that he's faster than Lewis. If I have, apologies, because it shouldn't have come out that way. And I don't think he's faster than Lewis. And but I think he's really quick. He's really quick. You know, I think he's quicker than Carlos, for example, Sainz. And I think he's, you know, it's an interesting comparison between him and Lando, isn't it? They're different drivers. I think Lando's got slightly longer corners than George, but George has got slightly spikier inputs than Lando. So they balance one another out pretty well. But I don't think George's corners are as short as Lewis's when Lewis wants to drive a short corners, and I don't think his inputs are as supple as Lewis's. So ergo, I don't think he's a faster driver. Richard Barnes is saying Red Bull new side pods. Wow, car looks brilliant. Okay, that's good. Looking forward to seeing that. I mean, talk to you guys. That's why I haven't seen them. But we'll see them there. I mean, amazing that. Well, not amazing really. I mean, it's not that big a deal to do new pods if you're Red Bull, is it? You know where you're going. You're not wasting money any more than you need to, and you might as well do something as a bit of an upgrade. Thinking of 2024. Mr. Charles, hi Peter. Wonderful podcast and channel you have here. Thank you very much. It's kind. Simply lovely. Quick fun question. Which 3 drivers from the current Formula 1 lineup would you pick for a Le Mans 24-hour entry and why? Wow, you're asking somebody who doesn't know very much about Le Mans. Let me think about... I mean, the weird thing about Le Mans was Henri Pescarolo used to crash Frank Williams' Formula 1 car after Frank Williams' Formula 1 car. You'd be going out in the circuit at any given day in 72 after about 20 minutes of practice, and there would be Henri driving back, walking back to the pits, green helmet in hand. Henri, what's going on? Ugh, the car. I have a problem with the brakes and the car is destroyed. And he would walk back. I don't know how many times that happened. And then how many Le Mans 24s did he win? I don't know, a lot. And I got my book here from Mr. Le Mans, Tom Christensen, good buddy of mine. Very talented driver that should have been given an F1 chance, a real F1 chance, in a proper team, in a proper car. Very talented driver. Good TV commentator now as well. And then you got Brian Redman telling us about how he could have won Le Mans if Seppi Siffert hadn't missed a gear in the 917 going past the pits, trying to go too quickly, blowing the engine. So I don't know, what does it take to win Le Mans these days? Have you got to be incredibly mechanically sympathetic? I don't know. I think these cars have a lot of built-in firewalls, don't they? You just have to be in a very good team, use your brain, not make any mistakes, be good at driving in the wet, the night, and staying up late. So who would that be? Probably not Lewis. He'd probably get a bit bored with the whole thing, I imagine. I think Charles probably would. Max, I'm sure if he put his mind to it, and that's what he was doing, and to win Le Mans, he's with the best car and the best team, he'd probably be very good at it. Not sure if he'd be very good at driving sort of at 7/10, because he's never done that before. You'd probably get bored and fall asleep or something. So who would I go for? Daniel Ricciardo would probably be quite good, I think, go round and round. Checo would probably go round and round, wouldn't he? Not sure I'd have the 2 French boys in there. Bit too volatile. Bottas, there you go, he'd be good. Valtteri would be a good Le Mans driver. Valtteri and Daniel together, not a bad team. There you go, there's my pairing. Two good blokes as well. Got there in the end. Matali says, hi Peter from Hamburg. It's such a short comment, but such a sweet comment. Thank you very much. But equally, I'll just read it out as distinct from cutting and copying and pasting. Now I'll do another one here. That's another short corner question. It seems to have a whole hornet's nest is short corner business, isn't it? I thought I was just sort of doing that, just talking about everything that most people talk about, but it seems to be something that some people are embracing for the first time, which is good. Very pleased to know that. Elliot Davidson, hi Peter, love hearing from a short corner aficionado. Oh well, there you go. Well, Elliot knew all about it. Good on you. Over the next 20 plus years, which area do you see innovating the most? Overall speed, aero, engine efficiency, etc. Thank you for the quality work. Well, could it be that they will understand the science of short corner driving and they will get on top of that? And 10 years from now, we'll have graphics showing the different shape of corner entry between drivers like Carlos Sainz and drivers like Charles Leclerc. Won't be those two, of course. And we're actually seeing it in numbers or shape or drawings or something. Maybe we will see it and it'll be a standard thing. That'll be good. And it's not that far away because Rob Wilson has developed this amazing vest which allows you to, you wear the vest and it reacts, whether it be colors, vibrations or whatever, on a display or on the dash. And you can drive a Rob Wilson lap if you like, which is short corners, gentle firm braking, little turn, big turn steering, getting the weight transfer correct, putting on the additional lock when you need to, perfect rates of input for all of that. Or if you brake a little bit too hard, a little bit too in a straight line, you'll get a warning that you haven't done it correctly. Or if you turned in a little bit too much or too late, you'll get a warning there. So that you can learn to drive the perfect lap, and you can actually program it then to be a different lap. You could program it to drive a Lewis Hamilton lap, or you could program it to drive a Fernando Alonso lap, and you could put the vest on. Right, I want to be Fernando Alonso here and see how he turns in. You could do all of that. They'll probably ban it when it gets to the point of being super good, which I think it will be pretty soon. They'll probably ban it all because they'll see it as a driver aid, but that maybe 10 years from now, maybe that's what everyone will have. So it'll be interesting. In terms of technology, I mean, we've got to assume that a lot of what we do with the rule book is going to be dictated by going the right direction in terms of green technology and what is commercially viable. So a lot of it, I mean, 50% electrification for 2026 is a huge change to the way Formula One engineers will be thinking and operating. So that's the first big change in that area, isn't it? And then it's going to go further down those roads, I think. So it'll be less of a driver, even less of a driver thing than it is now, probably. So I can't see in those areas overall speed, aero efficiency. It'd be kind of nice if we had a pretty free rule book based on cost that could be spent designing and building the car, and obvious things like fuel and oils and other materials that are good for the planet, electrification as well. But beyond that, the engineers have a reasonable amount of freedom. That would be good. And obviously the amount of downforce you can generate without loss of drag, without increase of drag is a huge thing still. So that's still going to be the thing, hopefully. I didn't really answer the question, did I? It's a difficult question to answer, I think. Need a better brain than mine, I think, to answer it correctly. But thank you, Elliot, for that. Nice comments too, very kind. People say, this is from another name that I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Somebody else probably could. Probably means something in code. Hello, Blackie. The cat's just walked in. It's not my name. I didn't give it that name, believe me. It's a stray we found and it had it around it, and that's what the person who had found it called it. People say Aston Martin needs a better driver than Stroll, but I think it suits them to be lower in World Championship, so they can develop the car into a World Drivers' Championship. Suits them to be lower in the World Constructors' Championship, so they can develop the car into a World Drivers' Championship winner. What's your thoughts on that? Well, my thoughts are that everybody who's an Aston Martin fan should be very grateful that Lance Stroll is a Formula One driver, because if he wasn't, his father wouldn't have bought the team and wouldn't be Aston Martin. So the whole thing is hinged around Lance Stroll, without him, there wouldn't be an Aston Martin Formula One team because his dad wouldn't be doing it. So that's the first point. So he is, without Stroll, there would be no Aston Martin. So there's no point even thinking about, they need a better driver than Stroll. I mean, anybody who thinks that doesn't understand the genesis of the team. So I don't think they think in terms of World Constructors' Championship. I just think, like Sterling Moss, they just want to go out and do as well as they can in every race. And obviously there are budgetary controls now that were not around before, but equally they've got much more money as a team than they've ever had before, and they're going into that great new factory with all those facilities. They've got very good people there still. So they will be hoping that they, on the back of all that they can be up there with Red Bull with Red Bull really. So that's what they're hoping. And I think and I think the old man thinks that so long as they've got Lance in one car, they're 90% of the way there. All they need is another driver that Lance can match himself against and can maybe win some races if Lance isn't winning races. I'm sure that's how he thinks. I'm sure he thinks Lance is, if that car is capable of winning a world championship, that Lance Stroll is quite capable of being world champion. And I don't think Lawrence Stroll would be in Formula One if he didn't think that. Any more than any driver would be in Formula One if they didn't think they could win a Grand Prix and therefore the world championship. There's a massive amount of ambition there. CB56 says, evening, Peter. Hi there. And it's going to have to wind it up pretty soon very soon, because I've got to get onto this other call. Tacitus Kilgore has taken another position saying, stop asking random questions. Okay, I'll take your word for it. Ducati Ohol says, which team will be the second best team in Hungary? I won't paste these up because, I will, because why not? It's silly not to. Which team? While I'm pasting it, I'll be thinking of the answer. I was going to say Aston Martin, but be Aston or Mercedes, I would guess, wouldn't it? Be surprised if it isn't one of those two by now. If Mercedes don't have a decent car by now, around Hungary, then they might as well give up, because it's, not, if they can't build a car that will be quick around Hungary with drivers like Lewis and George, forget it. So be Aston and Mercedes, I think. I think they'll be quicker than Ferrari. Don't know why I'm saying that. Probably wrong. But I don't know. I'm not very good at, it sounds incredibly arrogant, doesn't it? I'm very good at thinking about the second best team. I never really think about who's the second best team going to be. Doesn't interest me really. I'm only interested in the first best team, if that's the right way of phrasing it. Ow! Stop it. Right. Stop it! Got claws over my foot now. Dexter's behaving incredibly. It was quite funny actually earlier. We had a thunderstorm here and he absolutely goes berserk when he hears thunder. Rushes around the garden barking like a maniac. It's very funny. And we've got this blue sort of table box thing. Well, what is it? It's a side table thing that opens and it's got a lid. And if you drop the lid, it goes boom. And it's very like the sound of thunder. We call it blue thunder because it's blue. And whenever we drop that, Dexter just barks like crazy, thinking it's thunder outside. So when the thunder actually came, Jack was pushing him outside for the thunder, and I was dropping the lid. So he had the blue thunder and the real thunder, and he was rushing in and out, barking. Very funny. Back to Joe. Hi, Joe. Hi, Peter. I've done this one. I've gone to all that trouble, mate. Why has that reappeared? I tell you what, I don't know what's going on now. Maybe there are a lot of questions. I know that's what's happened there, but not your fault. It went back for a while. It was a lot of questions I hadn't seen. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to read some out now because I'm not doing a very good job of going through all these, am I? This is from Joe again. Hi, Peter. Massive fan of your analyses. Greetings from Holland. Do you think there will ever be a series about the teams, engineers, mechanics, and team principals day to day? You mean like the Netflix thing? Probably not. No, most people love the stars and the drivers and the celebs and the paparazzi and all that stuff. So I don't know. Probably not. Be good if there was, though, wouldn't it? As I've always said, we should be privy to the driver's briefing, and we should be privy to at least one team debrief after practice on a Friday or a Saturday. I know there are secrets, but a decent director can get around that working with a proper team. And we should have GoPro cameras in the road cars they drive to and from the track as well, I think. So here's one from Nick Christie. So let's put that up. I'd be interested to know what everybody thinks about this system I'm doing. I'm sure you'll all say, well, it's pretty good, Peter, but it took a long time. Come on, get it sorted for next time. I'm not sure that it is sortable, though. I don't think there is a way of getting these lines to be the right length without me doing this physically every time. I mean, you're not seeing what I'm doing right now, but anyway, Nick Christie, you're a kind voice in Formula One, Peter. Really, thank you very much. You're familiar with Jaime Alguersuari at Toro Rosso. He declines a seat at Lotus to stay loyal Hungary at Red Bull, and then was dumped in December. Wow. Yeah, the DJ. Yeah, I hung out with him once in his home in Barcelona, and good guy, nice guy. I was thinking about him the other day, actually. It was Hungary, wasn't it? His first Grand Prix. And he was just thrown in the car. He didn't do it at all badly, and he was a sort of semi-permanent fixture for a while, and then Red Bull do what they do. Not the only driver that's happened to. Patrick Friesacker is one of the great, he's a very talented driver, I think. Okay, he's working for Red Bull now, does a brilliant job running all the cars at the Red Bull ring and all the driver instructors there, and he does a brilliant job. And he does a lot of the, the stunt driving for Red Bull as well. So when you see Max Verstappen doing these runs and these donuts and stuff like that, quite often it's Patrick driving the car. And there are plenty of others. And it all started with Scott Speed, really. They spent all that money on him and then just dumped him. So compared with the amount of money they spent on Alguersuari, that was nothing compared to the money they wasted on Scott Speed. I think it all comes down to, although Red Bull, I think, do a fabulous job, although they've been an incredible supporter of motorsport over the years, for 20, I don't know how many years, going back to 94 at least, I guess. They are, a lot of the money they've spent on young drivers has been misspent, I think, personally, due to not using Rob Wilson to evaluate drivers and to train drivers. They've never used him, and I think that's a mistake, and I think that's shown in the number of drivers in the Red Bull Academy that have just fallen by the wayside. And it's almost by luck that the driver they've got, because he's just won 4 or 5 races in a Formula 4 championship, turns out to be an incredible talent. It's not because he's been molded that way by the academy. It's just that he is that good. But quite often, if they do need a bit of tuition and do need a bit of molding, they don't get it and they just get discarded. And I think that's such a waste. I don't know why they don't use somebody as logical as Rob to train young drivers, because his record is bulletproof in that respect, and yet they never do. And had they used Rob in the very early days with Scott Speed, they could have saved themselves a lot of money. And equally, some other very talented drivers who have been put. Ammermuller was another, wasn't he? Ammermuller was good, and he just sort of got dropped without any warning at all, from what I remember. And so it goes on. I think, to me, it's completely illogical to be doing a young driver academy of any description without using the Rob Wilson system. It's completely illogical. I don't understand why any of them do. Most of them, therefore, do it purely because it's a way of making money, and the drivers they have are drivers that are kind of paying to be in the academy in many cases, sadly, and it kind of doesn't justify the term academy. So, yeah, Jaime Alguersuari. Very strange story, that one, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one, because we've got there's been a bit of a shake-up at Alpine, hasn't there, with the top brass there. Otmar Saf now is still team principal, which is, in my opinion, a very good thing, and that's good. But there's a new shake-up, and I think Jacob S here has a better understanding of what's going on there than most of us. So let's see what he's got to say about that. Looks good. Okay, let's have a look. Interesting development at Alpine. Laurent Rossi, no longer in the CEO role at Alpine, moved to manage special projects within the group. Philip Creef replaces him. Story at Toro Rosso. He declines a seat at Lotus. Oh, that last bit was, I hadn't deleted. I hadn't deleted the Alguersuari thing. So that's interesting, isn't it? I'd better just get rid of that last bit. It'll confuse everybody. So, yeah, and that's and who was the? There was another name mentioned there. Actually, let me just have a look there, see what that was all about. I'm just trying to get my head around what's happening at Alpine. That's probably a good thing, because in Laurent Rossi, he was very ridiculously critical of Alpine quite recently, to the point where you think, what is this guy trying to do? Destroy the team? And it's good now that it looks like there's going to be a slightly where are we? Here we go. Bruno Famin is now, I think there's a guy called Bruno Famin who's now in charge of the F1 team, and Otmar's responsible to him. And I think that's a good thing. That's the impression I get. So it's all a bit confusing, all that Alpine stuff, isn't it? It used to be such a straightforward team. Renault in the old Marie-Claude Beaumont, Alain Prost, Jean-Pierre Jabouille days, but it's all changed. Why do things change in life? Why don't things stay the same? If it's working well, just keep going. Alex Beek. Let's see what he's got. I see sometimes when I don't delete everything, it's because one question's longer than another. That's why that happens. Just making a feeble excuse for my inadequacies. I'll tell you something else I bought today that I think is a very good thing, and that is one of these platforms in which you put a laptop with fans in it. Needed here in Spain. Everything was getting very hot, and now everything's nice and cool. Excellent. €35. One of the best things I bought in a long time. Alex Beek. Hi, Peter. I wonder how many Formula One strategists are listening to your live stream. How many do you guess? 0. Why would they? They know it all. They don't need to listen to Peter Windsor, that's for sure. I'm not sure it's strategists that need to listen anyway. It's more, isn't it drivers, actually, that need to think? I've often thought, I wonder what Lando thinks when I say his corners are quite long. You say, what do you mean? What are you on about? Corners that long? Very short. That's very quick. Yeah, we're going to have to do that one day, aren't we? No, I don't think they do. I think the engineers, I've got about, like you probably, most people, I've got about 5 what I call really close friends in Formula One, all of whom are engineers. And all I talk about with them really is driving and short corners and all that stuff. And they're kind of all on the same wavelength. So it always amazes me that more of it isn't done actually out there in the field. I guess they're just too busy doing everything else they have to do to run the cars. Here we go. I'm going to leave off the Tim here. The T of Tim, as in Tim Loonan. Sorry about that, Tim, but I'm trying to do everything in a bit of a hurry now because we haven't got that much longer to go. In fact, we've got no time to go. So it might have to be the last question, having said all of that. Let's have a look. It's a good question, though. Let's have a look. Right. Tim Loonan. Sorry about that, Tim. Very, very poor of me to do that. In fact, I wonder if I can, let me just check that. I can just write the T myself, I guess. Oh, no, I can't, funnily enough. No, it won't go in. Okay. Paid drivers have a negative image these days. They always have had a negative image, to be fair, but anyway. But did people forget Lauda, Schumacher, Alonso? In my opinion, Formula One wouldn't be where it is without paid drivers. What do you think? Well, it depends on what you mean by a paid driver, of course, because you could argue that, let's say, Lance Stroll is the greatest paid driver of all time, because yes, he's there because his dad is paying all the bills, but at least his dad has gone out and, if you like, created a new team out of an old one, Aston Martin. So in that sense, the paying of Lance, the payment for Lance to be in Formula One has been a very constructive thing, and it's given a lot of jobs to a lot of people, and it's a whole new thing. So in that sense, you've got to say, wow, that's the perfect use of being a paid driver, and he's got a reasonable amount of talent as well. So if you go through the grid, quite a lot of drivers at some point would have had to have begged, borrowed, not stolen, I won't say stolen, but begged and borrowed money to get to the next level of motor racing. And does that make them a paying driver? And Nigel Mansell, mortgaging his house to do 5 races with March in 1978, Formula 3 races. Does that make him a paying driver? Kind of does, doesn't it? If he hadn't paid that money to March, he wouldn't have raced in 78 and probably would never have made Formula 1. Niki Lauda, as you say, bank loan to get the BRM deal. Michael, I guess, at some point. Yeah, you're right. So, Formula 1 revolves around money. And when Flavio and Bernie, with Bruno Michel, decided how to take control of Formula 2 and Formula 3, they basically said, let's create these, let's take over Formula 2 and Formula 3 and make it championships that we make money from. Don't give the Formula 2 and Formula 3 categories any television or exposure to speak of, because we want all that for Formula 1. We don't want them in the Formula 1 paddock, apart from the odd pass or two, because they're going to be enough rich daddies around to pay all the bills. And that's what's happened. It's obviously not all rich daddies, but there are certainly a lot of rich benefactors and families. Some drivers are there on merit, but most drivers have had to go out and raise money, get money, whatever, to get into Formula 2 and Formula 3. The amounts of money you require are ridiculous. So at that level, for the return you can give anyone, because television, as I say, it's covered, but who watches it in terms of real numbers? And so that's always been the problem. And it wasn't helped by the Bernie, Bruno, Flavio approach to Formula 2 and Formula 3. If by contrast they'd said, let's make sure that the Formula 2 and Formula 3 categories benefit from everything that's going on in Formula 1, and young drivers can benefit from the sponsorship that's coming into Formula 1, and we get the Formula 1 teams to start putting a certain percentage of their budgets to help young drivers, and we're going to give access to all the Formula 2 and Formula 3 teams to the Formula 1 paddock for hospitality. If they'd done all that, it'd be a different story. But we don't have that. So a lot of the drivers in those categories are there because they've got the money to do it. And a lot of the drivers who haven't got the money never make it even to Formula 3, let alone Formula 2. I can think of several young drivers who are never going to make it to FIA Formula 3, even though, in my opinion, quite capable of winning a Formula 1 race. They have the talent at that level. And so that's the sad thing about motor racing. There's always going to be great drivers who will never be given the opportunity. Anyway, on that note, I've got to go and take this other call. It is to do with the Formula 1 exhibition, which is gathering pace in terms of its future and its next life. And so I can't talk about where that's going to be, how it's going to be, but it's very, very, can I use the word exciting? It's not a great word these days, is it? I can't think of a better word. It is quite exciting. Exhilarating is a better word. And so, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Apologies to everybody if I haven't got through. I know some of you are quite annoyed that I can't get through to all the questions. Just keep trying. And maybe it's a good idea not to sort of load up the questions before I go live, because sometimes I'm guilty of deleting those because I'm playing around with things on the technology which somehow magically deletes everything. And so I don't want to be guilty of that. So maybe don't do that too much. But equally, if you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you, that's for sure. And And equally, I'll be trying to do another one of these live feeds on the Sunday night after every Grand Prix. I think it'd be a good thing to do, wouldn't it? Because we all want to talk about the race, and we can look at things, and you guys are going to have ideas that I won't have thought of, and we'll have data coming in as I'm talking as well. So that's something. Let's try that. I think this stream's gone okay in terms of glitches. Hopefully it has, and because of that, we'll try it again on Sunday night after the race. Friday, Saturday, I'll do the normal videos, and so that'll be it. I'll see you next on Friday, in effect. So big thanks to Jetcraft and to Pitbox.io, two mega supporters of this channel. Wonderful to be in partnership with them, and please read and go to their sites. You can see the description below this video. And with no more ado, I will now seamlessly go to our official ending of this video. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. See you soon.